Hello, everybody who's already there. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, we hear you.
Excellent. So at least the voice works. So I think we have a...
Hello from Sweden.
Yeah, hello from Germany. So I'm glad that at least some folks joined the meeting. I actually had no real expectations. It's actually the first time for a format like this for me. So if we had it previously, we already had some agenda set and some folks pre-arranged, etc., etc.
No.
And the technology I'm using is actually, well, not new. I guess a lot of folks run Jitsi, but we decided to run our own, and I've configured it for quite a bit. And so it's actually the first practice drill for the platform itself. So let's see how it turns out. So let's wait till 5 sharp. Yeah, and there we are. So let me again express my gratitude for everybody who joined. If you haven't seen the initial slide, the meeting is being recorded. I'm not sure if we will finally broadcast it. It quite honestly depends on if it can be of general use or not, but you should be prepared that it is broadcasted. So if you have any concerns at any time, please be sure to voice it. I can obviously edit everything out if that's required, but it's being recorded. Yeah. It's as I said a minute or two ago, it's first time for me for a format like this, and I had the idea, well, let's just look how this could work out. I thought a little bit within the past couple of weeks and months how to better improve the situation, etc. And this is a very pure experiment for me. Hopefully one that will turn out good. And if so, it's definitely something that I would consider to do again.
Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, at least I. So I have no agenda, and as I wrote in the blog posting, I'm open to whatever question comes up. My objective, being a little bit selfish, is to get an understanding if such a meeting can make any sense at all. So I would also be grateful if you could maybe later on provide some feedback if that was helpful and how we could evolve it and all those things. Yeah, with that, I would like to just wait for the first person to come up with a question or comment or whatever.
So we don't need to raise the hand? Can we just go straight ahead?
That's a good point, yeah. We should do that.
Okay, I raised the hand, so
yeah.
if I may start. So my name is Vitaly, and I was actually asking my questions in mailing list recently. And I'm quite interested to know more about reliable logging through syslog and using, for example, syslog and rsyslog in particular for financial transactions, flight recorders, things like this. Because I am under the impression that if it is used for this purpose, it shall be configured a little bit different from how it is usually configured. And in particular, I am interested in the RELP protocol. What is it and how it is supposed to be used? Is it only between two different syslog instances, or can I use it from my client application?
Yeah.
So
let's start with RELP, because that's in a sense the easier question. A couple of years ago, when we tried to make syslog transport more reliable, we came about problems in the TCP IFC. It's not a problem. It's actually something how TCP works. And the bottom line, if you look at TCP, plain TCP without an application layer acknowledgement. If you look at TCP, the application, any application, just sends data to the socket, and the operating system and the socket subsystem decides how to package that inside the TCP frame and how to actually send it over to the network and how to do retry processing and all those things. But what the application sees, and that's the only thing that it sees, is when you have done the socket write command, when you've given the data to the operating system, then the operating system by RFC acknowledges it got the data and it tells you it's okay, I'm happy with it. So any OS buffer, anything that's happening on the network, and it can be pretty much that happens on the network in terms of buffering, is outside of the scope and the knowledge of the sending application. So let's say we have a window size of 128K, which is not unusual if you have high traffic flow, and just look at the network layer. Then when our syslog sends, and let's say you have even 1K messages, that means you have 128 messages on the wire that our syslog considers to be successfully sent, but you don't know if it was really a success. So when the connection breaks, and for example, load balancers do that very often, they just break the connection, and then our syslog has no idea of knowing what was sent and what was not sent, because this is beyond that what the operating system reports, and the operating system does not report it because it's what the RFC says. And this is not a problem in TCP protocol because TCP is a transport layer protocol. So it expects an upper layer protocol
so you need to
do this acknowledgement thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And the traditional syslog protocol simply has no upper layer, no real upper layer acknowledgement. And this is where RELP comes in. What it does is it adds an application layer protocol on top of this. So when you send data via RELP, the same thing happens with the difference that in RELP, every message has a sequence number, and the receiver acknowledges the receipt of the sequence number. So from a broad view, I need to phrase it a little bit vaguely. From a broad view, our syslog, due to the sequence number exchange, is always able to understand what has actually been received by the other peer and what not. And so when a connection breaks, it can resend whatever is missing and not acknowledged. In practice, this can lead to a mild message duplication if something goes wrong at the real wrong instant. We do not try with RELP to model a three-phase commit or something like this. The core idea is it's better to have a message twice than to lose one. And this is
rsyslog to rsyslog, basically, the protocol. What shall I do if the message are lost, even in the local host? Because I made several tests, and it looks like this is totally normal. If I start to log with a crazy speed, then even through devlog, then obviously the messages are lost, and this is more way understandable. But how can I control my application in such a way that the messages are not lost, even for the price of actually slowing down the application to make it synchronous?
Let's look at the RELP thing first. One thing I would like to comment on just quickly, it's in practical views, it's often rsyslog to rsyslog, but RELP is a library or is a protocol which is also implemented by other folks, and it also provides a library with librelp, so any application can use the RELP protocol, but it's hop by hop. So what you experience and what you see in practice is that indeed the previous steps may fail and you may lose messages there. So this calls for the general we don't want to lose a message paradigm. Most often when people come and say we don't want to lose messages, we never want to lose messages, this is not what they really mean. Because most often there are situations where it is better to lose a message than to not lose it. Let me give an example. If you have an ATM machine and that ATM machine logs and you have a network disconnection, if you want to ensure that you never lose a message, the ATM machine will stop working. So
yes,
in that sense, there's always a situation where you really need message loss. But message loss in a controlled sense is usually what we want. And then we had this discussion on the mailing list quite often. I'm not sure if David Lang, I just thought I saw the name. David Lang is on the conference. He always explains that it's impossible to always guarantee that nothing is ever lost. Even large losses may happen. And we had a very long mailing list thread a couple of years ago about this theme, and it ended up, and I just go to the extreme now, that a bump hit a building somewhere in a distant location where your log is stored. So there's always something that can go wrong. So what we do when we try to prevent message loss is we must first think which scenarios message loss is acceptable under, what price are we willing to pay, and based on this evaluation of criticality, then we go back to our configuration and consider what can we do to make it as reliable as we need it. And now we come back to our syslog. You are totally right, there are different subsystems that you need to control. For example, our syslog usually buffers everything in memory for speed. So if you really, after not losing any log messages, for example, during a power loss, which can also happen if you have a new PS. I more often than once remember a case where you have a battery backed up system with switch over unit, and then there's a problem with the switch over unit and everything is blown again. So this is one of these impossible to capture scenarios. So if you have your messages in memory, they will definitely be lost when something goes really wrong. So you may want to put them into a disk queue, where the disk queue is frequently written. You can configure how often it is written to and how often it's persisted, etc. The more often, the slower the system gets, but the more reliable it gets. But again, you need to watch out. If you configure it very reliable, and you ensure that, or you sacrifice performance for that, you may end up with some situations where you actually lose more messages than you would lose in a disaster case, because some of your senders cannot, or the receiver can no longer catch up with what the sender has. Especially if you consider situations where, for example, an attack is going on and your log volume increases rapidly. So you really need to look at where to fine-tune these things and to look at this. From an syslog technical perspective, there are two main things that you usually want to do. Is either you use a disk queue, or you use a small memory queue together with a disk queue. If you say, well, I'm happy with losing 1,000 messages, it's not fine, but I can accept it. Then if you use a little memory queue with 1,000 messages plus a disk queue, then your performance is much better, and some of the strange scenarios will never happen. And if you can't go for that, then you go to a pure disk queue, which is awfully slow, and you need to sync it very often, and you'll end up with a couple of hundred messages per second that gets through. Even then, something can go wrong. That's one approach. The more extreme approach is to remove the disk or memory queue and use something that's called a direct queue. A direct queue is the abstraction of no queue, actually. In queue.type, you can say direct, which means if you have, for example, a relv input and some file or database output, whatever, the relp input is directly coupled to the output. So whatever is received by relp is without queuing immediately being processed by the output. So there is still some loss scenario that we don't care for. Again, it's not a total loss-free three-phase commit database system or something like this. It's not a method queuing system. So you can, for example, use a broker in between if that really increases your chances of losing less messages. If there are always very tiny scenarios where you could lose some messages, and this is why I caution to include these things into a concept and configure our syslog accordingly. But you can get very close to zero message loss, but you can't get 100% to it.
Then I have another related question. So currently I plan to test the system when I have two different, basically I have different message types. There are message types which I don't want to lose, and there are message types which I'm ready to lose, more or less, or the customer is ready to lose. But in this case, the setup which I want to test now is to have two different Unix sockets. One deflog, basically, that goes through the traditional way and deliver traditionally to rsyslog, and another one is a dedicated Unix socket where another instance of rsyslog D is listening, or maybe it's even possible to configure rsyslog D to listen to several sockets. I have not tested it, but looks like this is possible, judging by documentation.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Will it actually, and in this case, I will send messages of one type to one queue and the critical messages to another queue. So, and in this case, another queue I can configure it in a different way. So will it actually help to guarantee that those prioritized messages will be handled separately, or will they be somehow mixed in the syslog internal logic after that?
The easy thing to do with that is when you define the input, the new input, define it to have a rule set and define the queue for that rule set. And when you do that, everything from that input will go to that queue and that rule set, completely independently of anything that uses the main rule set.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And by the way, I would really like to welcome David Lang. We have written, I think, for months in our time, but we never met live. So I'm pretty happy to have you here.
Yeah, I finally had to resort to getting on my phone using the app to get in.
Yeah, but that seems at least to have worked.
Yep.
Yeah, what I said, it's an experiment for me, and I forgot one other thing. Oh, I see I have chat messages. If we don't we don't want to concentrate on a single question. I'm happy with going through everything, but whoever else has questions, please use the raise hand tool so that we can cycle through the session. Otherwise, I'll just keep on these questions. Yeah, and David, especially for you, I'm considering doing things like today more often, and I'm also very interested in feedback on the session and how to organize things and all this, both technical and from a what makes most sense point of view. So with that, I would like to give back to the audience. If somebody... I've scared off everybody. Yeah, Yuri, please, go ahead. Also nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, excellent. At least
okay, I will enable some video as well. So hi. Actually, it's a bit late in Singapore, but I decided to join anyway. Okay, so...
Appreciate it.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for organizing this. It's really nice to meet almost like, well, in these COVID times, it's almost meeting in person. Okay, and then one thing I would like to raise today is the issue I raised a while ago, and we had some discussion with David, I guess, and David has strong vision on that thing. It's about supporting multiple upstreams. So when you sending messages to some upstream, and that upstream went down, you can have fallback now, like the option of queue. I cannot remember, not on queue, but the option on action. Like if this upstream is dead,
yes.
go next one.
Failover,
Yeah,
failover location.
yeah. So failover we have, but for load balancing, easiest way to use is to define multiple rule sets, and use call indirect and direct to send to based on hash or something like that. But it's messy. So if you need both load balancing and high availability, so you need to define, like if you have 3 upstreams, you need to define 9 rule sets. No, 3 rule sets, and every rule set will have 3 action, and every action will have, like, if previous is dead, then send to me. If previous is dead, send to me. So I can define it in current configuration, but it's really hard to do. I'm okay with syntax sugar, for example, which will hide it a bit. But I'd actually prefer to have this on lower level. So to be able to detect that upstream is dead, for example, and then just send it to, well, we will define that pool of actions, for example. Or we can somehow to connect multiple actions to single entity internally.
Yeah.
So, or just move the failover portion outside of our syslog, so that our syslog is sending to a single destination, and that destination implements the failover portion. I've done it both with external hardware failover, such as F5 load balancers. I've also done it in software on Linux with cluster IP, and I actually have a paper and presentation that I did on doing failover with that. If you ping me on the mailing list, I'll forward that to you. But the idea is, if you just have one IP address that you're sending to, that makes it really trivial on the senders, and we have the rebind every rebind interval option that will tell our syslog periodically, every X number of messages, or technically every X batches of messages, disconnect and reconnect in order to give the load balancer the ability to pick a different destination. And that does really, really well with load balancing. And if you use something like cluster IP combined with CoroSync and Pacemaker as a cluster manager, they can detect that one of your receivers is down and adjust them so that all the traffic will hit the other ones.
Yeah, I understand that. But actually, nowadays I can just define load balancer in any cloud provider and forget about complexity of this lower level things. But it's TCP, right? So if it's established, you need to reconnect to send to another upstream. And yeah, it's okay. Maybe if you have 100 virtual machines sending to that through that load balancer, I will get more or less even load on the thing behind that load balancer, like another syslog maybe, or maybe Greylog or whatever. It's hard to do.
Well, the rebind interval will help at least a little bit. I'm also thinking for quite a while about something that I think is, well, more or less in line with what Yuri could have on his mind. How about the ability, in some cases inside the configuration. We have these array type parameters. So, and currently we have OM FVD and target equals a single server. And what I'm thinking about is that you can give multiple servers instead of one, and maybe a mode in how to handle it. For example, do failover from one to the next, or like the rebind interval, whenever you have sent this and that many messages, switch to the next one in a round robin fashion, and all this. Would this be something that could be helpful? It's easier to explain config-wise than it actually is to implement it in regard to retry processing, etc. But the bottom line is, if we ignore the implementation nits, would it help to address this concern?
It would be a nice feature to have. I think we need it more with RELP than we would with OMTCP or OM forward, because the TCP loss mechanism. But if we have it on RELP, so that if one connection goes down, it will keep track of what it has tried to send and send everything, send things to the next for failover mode. That would be very useful. And yeah, some sort of round robin. Once you have that sort of capability of multiple destinations would be good.
Yeah, but well, this is one of good solutions. But is it just theoretically possible to move it a bit upper, so we can, like, for example, enable it for RELP as well, for TCP, for FVD, for maybe something else?
You can enable it in each module, but the code is module specific. Let's look at RELP and TCP. It's simply different calls that you need to do. So while there's a general framework, we don't have abstraction in a sense that we have a network sender and then have the network protocols below it. Instead, we have the output actions. That's historical, and the output action and completely covers the TCP sending part, or completely covers the RELP part. We have a kind of modular structure between TCP and GSS API. It's not perfect. In a perfect world, it would require quite a bit of redesign, and you would change the total lower layer to support this, and this is not going to happen really. But on the other hand, if it's implemented in one module, I would say it's not hard to redo it, for example, for RELP, or if you implemented it in RELP, it's not hard to redo it in TCP. Because then, and maybe we can move some of the subtle issues. Probably we even need to do that to the syslog core, so that actually what is specific to the output, to the plugin, is limited in sense. We have a lot of things that the syslog core does in an abstracted way, like the retry processing as such. This is also where we most often need or would need to make the complex modifications, because right now the action suspense and not a specific target inside the action.
It's like the encryption configuration. It's not. There's not an abstracted encryption layer that you can just put in everywhere. It's implemented per module.
Yeah. Yeah, and before anybody gets nervous, I'll not cut off at half past. I started with half past just to ensure that that I won't be alone for all the time, so we can continue for at least another for another half of an hour.
Hello. As Yuri said, he had to write 9 rules for his deployment. I think it can be done on the boot up of syslog when it processes the rules. Maybe at this point some automation to create the other 6 rules or the other set of rules may be helpful. For instance, if we put several destinations on the action part, maybe the preprocessor can deploy several rules at once and do the logic.
Yeah, it's possible. I didn't doubt about that.
Well, actually, another idea I had long on my mind, but time is limited. Another idea goes into that direction, but I hadn't thought about what Juan now described exactly. There are some things where the configuration is, well, pretty verbose, let's phrase it that way. And kind of a config preprocessor or some pre-processing statement like I just want to have a forwarder. It's default. That's too simple. I want to have something that puts JSON to Elasticsearch with a couple of 2-3 parameters could generate the configuration behind it. That's also in this direction. So some kind of meta configuration statement.
A configuration builder tool or something like that?
Yeah, well, more like a macro inside the configuration language itself. The configuration builder tool, we started a couple of years ago to create this configuration builder tool that's on the web page on our syslog. It's not really well maintained and it's not usable for those cases where you really need it when it gets complex, because it was too complex to fix that tool for each and every case. And we are far from graphical user interface design experts. It was a nightmare to get it. And this is why the current state is as it is. So I'm more thinking about macros, things where you have inside your configuration and specify I want to do this and that.
I could see that as being very useful. My only concern is when you start doing that, you can also start getting very complex if you allow everything. And so I would tend to say rather than just a macro inside the config, a tool that would create a file that you could include that specified everything and basically gave you a template to start with that you could then tweak as you have more specialized cases. Similarly, the -O option today really helps with understanding how includes work. But if instead of outputting the config line that it read in, it were to output basically the new style config language with all the defaults populated in there, that would be an improvement even further, as that would make it clear how defaults have applied, especially when you have a mix of old and new configuration. It would show you what the result is, as opposed to what you think the result is.
Yes, that's right. But is it a regular end user tool? I see the usefulness, no question about it. But is it a regular end user tool, or is it just for the power user? I have a concern that when I, as a regular user, create a basic syslog configuration, start this tool, and then I get a list with each parameter or with each object expanded and with 20, 30 parameters. Well, it would even be more than 50. Wouldn't that overwhelm the regular administrator?
I would call it a verbosity option. Have a low verbosity option that does something similar to what what it is today, where it just outputs the config as it's read in, and then a slightly more verbose option that output the V6 style config, which would be incredibly useful in helping people do convert over from one style to the other, and then more verbose option, at least one more verbose option, maybe more, to specify to include the defaults in the output. What I've started doing on my end is I'm making it a default to have -o etsy syslog.conf.generated on all my systems, so that just every time it starts up, it creates that generated config. So if there's ever a question of did something get included and so on, I've got that.
I see. Do we have any other thoughts on that topic in the audience? Doesn't look so. Yeah, but I think I understand the idea. Yeah. So you wouldn't use the fully verbose thing for always. Let's phrase it that way. Which, on the other hand, means just a second. What on the other hand means I need to know where we differ from the default, which is a little bit more complex. We talked about this on the issue tracker, I think, because it's something I will look into again. I remember from future issues that's a lot of work because the interfaces doesn't support it.
Yeah, I would say do what's easy. So what you did right now was the first easy thing. The next easy thing is a fully verbose list every option. Doing the middle ground of doing the middle ground is harder, and so go ahead and push that off till later. But anyway, we had someone else raise their hands here.
Yep, Juana.
I have a question. Is in your plans so how to allow the TLS connections mixed without TLS connections on the same instance of?
Yeah, indeed. It's on the list. It always moves a little bit to the back because we have this nice workaround with IMP TCP. I need to rewrite the driver layer. Actually, I was short of doing it, and something stopped me right in the middle. But you're right. It's actually not even that hard to do.
Yes, but in some places,
just a lot of work because we need to change things inside the driver layer. But it's a lot of trivial work.
Yes, because we are using in several places. We are using 2 instances of the syslog daemon for sharing the rules configuration. So it will be helpful for us to allow some input with TLS and other input without TLS on the same daemon.
You can do this with the workaround that I mentioned. The only thing, I'm not sure if that's your case, you need to be on Linux.
Yes, but the driver, the default driver is the same for all TCP inputs. So I haven't found a way to mix an input, TCP input without TLS, and
you need to look into a different module. We have the
IMP TCP versus IMTCP. So use IMTCP for the encrypted port and IMP TCP for the non-encrypted port. But yeah, it would be really good to be able to specify TCP as being optional, and even better to move the TCP configuration from a per module to a per input capability, so that you can have different certs for different ports, or different for different outputs. Going to different destinations, needing different certs or different encryption configuration. Yeah.
Well, actually, I need to say I started this experiment because I feel some kind of void. I have more than enough to do, but it's very hard to prioritize what is really needed. And I ended up with doing so many things that you could see that nobody's wrong, but a very, very, very tiny part of the community actually uses. And so I hope, and it really looks good, I hope to get some feedback from this session as well. But now I've also raised hand from Vitaly. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I have another question about coexistence of journal D and syslog D. So, and the question is maybe not technical, but more attitude and philosophical one. So what is your view on the future? Because it looks like that from systemd community point of view, we just need, applications, need to log through systemd, journal D, period. And then they build a whole infrastructure, like journal D can talk to another journal D and so on. In my opinion, it's like replication of what syslog does. And they are in the middle in this distribution. So in this case, what is your take on this, and what is the future you think?
David is smiling. just let me give a very broad answer. Whatever my take is, it doesn't affect what the journal or the systemd folks will be doing. So actually, my take is I really don't care because they don't care. But don't get me wrong. I'm not opposing these things, or I'm saying it's a user problem. When the journal started, we had very, very long discussions with the journal folks, even half a day in-person meeting at the Red Hat offices in Czech. The journal folks have their mission, and I like many things that the systemd team does. They are smart folks, but if you don't fit into their mission, they share nothing about you. So
yeah, I read in the recent handbook, Unix Administrator Handbook, the statement that in accordance with their mission to replace all the other Unix subsystems, systemd has introduced journal D. So
yeah.
Yeah, David, you.
The journal D people went and the systemd people went and created journal D based on what they assumed our syslog was capable of, and their assumption of what syslog was capable of was many years out of date at the time that they created journal D. They are very hostile to suggestions for interoperability. For example, they absolutely refuse to pass their internal information over to syslog through a devlog socket, passing their metadata as JSON. They say, well, there's no documented standard for this, so we absolutely refuse to do that. Never mind that every syslog daemon, modern syslog daemon, will then be able to do things. They just absolutely refuse to do it. There are a lot of people in the logging community who have been saying that, oh, syslog is obsolete, it's going away. At my day job, I'm doing a lot of work with Splunk, and they have been advocating that, oh, syslog is obsolete, it's going to go away. The few things that will keep using it, we'll just bypass syslog and have Splunk start receiving it, even though they do an absolutely horrid job of it performance-wise. And what they are seeing over the last few years is that syslog as a protocol is not going away. In fact, it's increasing, and there are vendors who have been using other protocols for their logging that are switching away from them back to syslog. The basic syslog protocol is the least common denominator. Anything that does logs, except journal D, understands it over the network, and anything that does logs can emit it over the network. And journal D is off on their own kick right now, and they as they keep finding that syslog does things that journal D doesn't do, they invent an incompatible way for journal D to do it. That doesn't play nice with other log implementations, but we can't control them. Even simple requests like okay, you have all this data, dump it out in a JSON form. You can dump all this data out with journal CTL to standard out. But they refuse to make that a capability that would let journal D write to dev log. Back when they first came out, I was very vocal in my opposition to them taking this over, and people kept insisting that, oh, it's optional. There's a way to bypass it. I have been looking recently and not found what that way is.
There is no way, actually. There is no way.
Yeah, I have seen machines, production machines where 10-20% of the production machine is spent running journal D, and it's running journal D to pass the log then to syslog, and it's a complete waste, but but they make it very, very hard to bypass.
And they lose the messages in between sometimes, actually.
Yep.
That's kind of a big problem. Where I started my journey, when I found that the messages are lost. And then I identified that the bottleneck is actually not syslog D, but journal D. In our case, it's kind of old implementation of systemd, but anyway, systemd is not something which you can easily remove or replace or upgrade. You need to upgrade the whole distro.
Yeah, but nevertheless, we try to interact as good as possible with the journal, but it's beyond our control. And I need to say, I've one constant. I'm doing syslog since 25 years or so, and one constant in these 25 years was that every year syslog would have been died. Every year, everyone said syslog is dead, so don't do it any longer. And I hear the very same thing since 25 years, and it's still very much alive. And as David said, much more alive than it was previously. I see that the journal makes a lot of sense on a laptop machine. You don't need a full-blown syslog instance over there. And on the laptop machine or on a desktop, the journal really offers some benefits. If you just want this admin level, but
D is it works really well for a laptop or a standalone desktop, and they assume that it'll work for enterprise apps.
Yeah, that's the problem. So I think the scope of syslog and the syslog DS shifted. While we ran 10, 15 years ago, we ran on everything. We are now used by large organizations inside the data center. And in this environment, we used to be used there too 15 years ago, but this is now the primary environment. And this is also the reason why, in my point of view, the development of our syslog has refocused back from the low-end system up to the high-end system. It's currently being a bit refocused again because of the many IoT devices which may run a syslog instance because it's so much less performance intense like a full-blown journal implementation. So
then it looks like that there is also a problem in glibc because glibc does not allow. So basically, it just writes to devlog all the time. And now, if I want to log directly to syslog in a system which is systemd based, I need basically to modify my application and to log manually. But in this case, I cannot do the same with the application which I do not control. And like what David just described with the servers he's maintaining, so that there are 25% or something like this goes to journalD. So I think that if it is possible to patch glibc in such a way that it can be configured, like I have something etc log device.conf, and there to put.
Yeah, this is something that we try to provide via the liblogging std log, but as usual, it's very hard to get over the journal advertising. But that's not the only thing. The hardest part is syslog is so damn easy for an application to log to that this is a prime point why everybody supports syslog. And you know that libc also has some political strings attached, and it's not so easy to change the syslog API inside libc because it's also a POSIX API, etc., etc.
Yes.
So the full state of things is, well, let's phrase it that way, suboptimal.
We know that libc already does things based on environment variables. Time zones being in a case where we really wish that they didn't. But it might be worth trying to propose to the libc folks a option for a logging environment variable that if that variable is set, use it instead of devlog.
Yes, it would be fantastic.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
I'd say that
basically I check the sources in glibc and it's just devlog and that's it. So
it seems the modern way of fixing this is packing your application into some container and forwarding the devlog from any other point. I mean, you can actually create socket on file system, the syslog socket, and then mount it inside of container as devlog inside, and then your application will log directly to syslog. But containerization.
The problem with doing that is that we currently don't have the ability to add or remove inputs in our syslog. This is something I've proposed before, that we that we have a control channel or something like that you could talk to our syslog while running and tell it open a new input or close an input, so that you could add additional inputs inside containers. Would be nice, but that opens a nasty can of worms in how much of the configuration can really be modified at runtime. There's a lot of it that cannot, but it might be possible to just add some additional inputs or add additional instances of inputs or remove them at runtime.
If there is a way to evaluate part of configuration, like eval function, in that case you can send, you can create control socket, which is usual plain the Unix socket. Then you can send some control message into that socket, and on level of configuration of syslog you can evaluate something if you receive this message. I was using something like that to modify some configuration of syslog, but I cannot remember what exactly I did. So it's half possible here.
That's the type of thing I'm thinking of.
Well, it's very interesting, but we are really reaching the end of my deadline. I have one question. We had a couple of really great ideas. What would be a quick round to those who are talking or now would like to talk? What would be the feature that you would find most useful from what we discussed? We had the inputs, we had the output of the configuration in verbose mode. That's another thing. We have the multiple TCP listeners or destinations in the forwarding actions. What would you consider to be of greatest benefit from your point of view?
I would say that we should send out these lists to the mailing list and get votes there. But also add TCP configuration, or sorry, encryption configuration, both allowing encrypted and non-encrypted on the on the same port, and allowing encryption to be a per input or per output setting instead of per module setting.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, we had this exactly. Just skipped it. Yeah. Okay, so that's a cool idea. Yeah, I'll do that. Question to the format. What's your impression from this open meeting without agenda, online, on the time frame? Did the technology work for you? Did the meeting server in the background work for you, etc., etc.? Anyone? Is it something worth to repeat?
Yes.
It's very nice. I'm just afraid on the amount of people, because you have announced it only yesterday, and then I believe the amount of people, the amount of attendees is limited. But if you announce it well in advance, then it can be easily 100 persons, and maybe it will be quite different.
Could be, but I don't think so. Well, it for sure will make a difference, and at some point the server won't scale. That's for sure. I admit the very short announcement was part of the experiment, because right now my scheduling is pretty complex because I'm doing some volunteer work here in my community, and there's still a lot of things really wrecked with COVID and all these things. And so while it's sometimes very hard for me to schedule 2 hours out of the workday 2 weeks in advance, if it works somehow to schedule it 2 days in advance, I have more frequent often to do it than if I need to schedule 2 weeks in advance. That was part of the experiment. I don't outrule that we do it 2 weeks in advance. It's definitely interesting, and maybe we need to set different topics, etc., etc. Well, my personal impression, at least for me, it was very useful to get this really live feedback. It's different than discussing just per email, because you get more the feel of what's really needed and what's the idea behind it. So I would say I really liked it. It was useful. Yeah, some other final words? Topic specific, yeah, exactly. I think you'd say the same comment, topic specific. Well, if you have any suggestions for further meetings, just send them to the mailing list or to me or whatever, and I'm pretty sure we'll do one in the not too distant future, and maybe with a little bit earlier announcement. Is the time frame for at least Europe and America okay?
Works for me.
Yeah. I think we should also try one in the morning so that we get Asia even easier. So, well, and Europe has the share, the ability to choice.
I'm actually okay, but we can try to move it to morning as well.
Yeah. Maybe we can
So,
do one morning and
up to
one
you.
afternoon, and maybe, well, not maybe, but then we need to do some things twice. I think it's impossible to find a time frame where really everybody is able to participate at a convenient time. So, special thanks for taking the effort at this time of the day. You'll love the time. Excellent. Okay, then I would conclude if nobody else has. David?
So I've got one, wild idea to throw out here just to get people thinking. Our syslog has, and the other syslog daemons have the ability to work very well with JSON messages. Mm-hmm. I haven't been through doing an RFC, but I'm wondering, would it make sense for us to create an RFC define a standard for structured JSON messages in the body? I don't think it needs to be a complex one, but I think actually documenting a standard would and getting the other syslog daemon people on board for it, would be useful.
Cool idea. I can't say if it's actually possible, but it sounds worth trying. We need to check with the area director, the IETF. I think it'll be a little bit in the netconf area, etc., etc. Let's talk about this. Well, in a separate setting, maybe with folks that are actually interested in contributing work to it, because it needs a team to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so a cool idea at the end, and well, I managed to do it exactly at my deadline. Okay, thank you again for participating. It's very much appreciated. Bye-bye,
Thank you
and
very
happy
much.
logging, and
Bye.
keep safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.